Today's lecture will focus on writing effective conclusion paragraphs, which can come with their own unique set of challenges. So let's get started. What are some of the common misconceptions regarding the conclusion paragraph? The first is that you must restate your thesis word for word at the beginning of the conclusion. The second is that you must basically summarize or repeat your body paragraphs in the conclusion. The third, no one really cares about what you write in your conclusion. Fourth, you must start with in conclusion or to summarize. Or fifth, concluding means to vaguely wander away from the topic. I want to go back to these first two for a second because I think these are ones that students really cling to because they've been taught this for so many years. You want to present something new in your conclusion, but you don't want it to be something that's propelling your argument forward. It's a way of tying the argument up. It's saying that I'm done with my argument. I want to leave you with this thought. And I think students get a little bit scared and they panic and they've been taught, well, I'm just going to repeat my points in the conclusion paragraph. And so that's what they end up doing. So the goal of this lecture is to get you to learn that there are better ways to write a conclusion. So let's move forward to a sample of a conclusion paragraph that is poorly written, which was also donated by the person who wrote the intro paragraph about exercise. My conclusion about my feelings about exercise is that I have good and bad feelings about exercise. My good and bad feelings and attitudes come from my good and bad experiences. Sometimes there are things about exercise, like lifting weights, where I really feel really sore. But sometimes when I get a second win and can keep running, I feel better about the decision to go to the gym for the day. The end. And I don't think anybody can read this and think that it's a great conclusion paragraph. Again, it is clearly written, but it is not well written. So let's talk about why it's a bad conclusion. One is that it is repetitive. It basically circles around the same ideas and there's no spark or interest in the ideas that are presented. It is also just boring and it does not engage the reader. It is also, as I said, it's poorly written. It's clearly written, but it is poorly written. And the writer clearly does not know what to do in a conclusion paragraph, so they're just going through the motions. So we're going to look at two techniques today. The first technique is to allow the conclusion to come full circle, touching on ideas presented in the introduction paragraph. And I want to note that this does not mean to repeat the ideas of the introduction, but to tie it to the ideas of the introduction. And so if you saw the lecture on introduction paragraphs, then you saw an intro paragraph on Plato's charioteer, so his tripartite theory of the soul. And this is actually the conclusion that the student wrote for his essay. Although it seems wrong to portray the villain to be violent media or even poetry, there is no doubt that Plato's arguments hold some merit even today. If people followed Plato's analogy of the charioteer, we would always follow the most logical path and therefore live the most pleasant life. Even so, it is worthy to consider the reports that Lanza might have had a mental disorder that might have hindered his abilities to adhere to reason. If this were the case, then Plato would have had a hot topic to ponder. A mental disorder might be described as many oppositions and conflicts within the soul. But how much opposition is needed to label someone who is unable to think rationally? Is there a quantitative answer? Unfortunately, Plato is unavailable to respond. So let's talk about what he's doing in this conclusion. The first is that he is referring to his overall argument, which was to say that there is a correlation between Plato's argument and what happened with the case of Adam Lanza. And so he's reconfirming that here at the beginning of his conclusion. But then the next thing that he talks about is he follows through on the idea that it's just difficult for everyone to follow that idea of the tripartite theory of the soul, the idea that logic is always ruling us. That's just not how we live. But then what he does that makes the conclusion really interesting is he introduces the idea that as much as Adam Lanza's case supports Plato's argument, there's an aspect of Adam Lanza that Plato wouldn't have understood. And that is the idea that Lanza had a mental disorder. And so what the author ends up doing is playing with that idea. How would Plato respond to that idea? What would Plato say? And his ultimate response is that we don't know. We don't know. And so this is a great way of ending a really strong essay. And it's not repeating his main points. It's really leaving you with something interesting to think about. So the second technique that I want to show you is that while analyzing or reflecting on the information presented within the body paragraphs, you want to end with a startling idea or notion. And for this example, we're going to look at the conclusion paragraph for specimen days, which was the other introduction paragraph that we looked at in the introduction lecture. When viewing the last pages of Specimen Days as a type of social criticism, it is clear that the exploration of humanity present throughout the book has reached its final conclusion. To be human is to find joy, to find passion, to find the ability to love. It is also emphatically a return to nature. Just as each novella centers on the characters of Simon, Catherine, and Lucas, each novella also evolves around the desire to escape what technology has created. This need for escape becomes more heightened with each story, starting first with Lucas's attempt to escape into the park and fade into the grass, followed by Kat and Smokey escaping the city of New York, and ending with Simon abandoning civilization altogether in exchange for the chance to pioneer west into the unknown. What Simon has discovered by the end of this final novella is something that few people are able to achieve. Ultimately, the greatest gift to humanity is the ability to be truly free. So what has the author done here? The first thing that the author has done is started with a concluding thought about the book in general, saying that what we've learned about being human. And then the author ties it to the idea that a part or an aspect of being human is tied to that return to nature. And so the author explores that a little bit more, but then it allows the author to end with focusing on Simon. And so we see that here with this final sentence, that we've learned something from this book, that the greatest gift to humanity is the ability to be truly free. So my final thoughts on writing conclusion paragraphs are the following. The first is that you have to have a purpose with your conclusion. I think many times the reasons why students have trouble with the conclusion is that they don't know what that purpose is. They're just trying to end it. And as a result, they end up making the second mistake, which is rehashing their essay's main points. You learn that in grade school, but you really don't want to be doing that by the time you've hit college. By the time you've hit college, you should be writing conclusion paragraphs that are better than that are more interesting than that. So you can start your conclusion with a statement about what your essay has revealed. That's a great way of getting you out of this mindset of I need to repeat my thesis or I need to repeat my main points. What have you learned as a result of writing this essay? Or what is the one thing that's missing from your argument that is not really something you need to develop, but something you want to leave with your reader? And it is the perfect time to reflect on what you've presented. Finally, ask yourself, what final takeaway do you want your reader to learn from your essay? I hope this lecture was helpful.